they are the best team in Blacktown Premier League football. Will they finish like a house on fire? Maybe more like a studio apartment on fire, I think, because your lost column reads 10. So just like lock in a little bit. The reality is they're good, but are they good? It's to the point now where Blake Curry is so good that I want to actually start a GoFundMe to pay for his PL1 registration. And I need to make sure that I don't get too carried away by how good their match of the round performance was. So let me try and not do that. I think you could get promoted. Because they've only played one game at home all season. 1 from 6. 1 from 6. It's becoming frustrating seeing Marong just run away with it all the time. But the reason they're doing it is because I really, really do think that... Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome back to the Blacktown Premier League podcast. My name is 𝐷𝐄𝐈𝐃. This is episode 14, but most importantly, this is the second ever mid-season review podcast. That means that every single team from the Langton Simmons Blacktown Men's Premier League 1, 2, and the Women's Premier League from Blacktown are going to be reviewed. Every single team. And then I've also got one, maybe two, players that I want to highlight for either being underrated, really having a good goal-scoring season or assist-providing season, perhaps a goalkeeper who's performing up and above their expectations. It's not necessarily going to be their best player, but someone to just talk about for specific reasons that I'll mention when we get to each player. I've also asked every single coach and some of the playing staff from all of the Blacktown Premier League teams and Women's Premier League teams to send me a video to give their own quick review to the teams that have done it. I will include it and respond to it here in this podcast. Then finally, which is different to last year, I'm going to give a quick prediction as to where I think the team will finish at the end of the season, which is going off the back of my predictions podcast at the start of the year. I don't think we need to delay any longer. Let's cue the intro music.
Here come Workers on!
But it's falling here towards 𝐼𝐃!
Oh my word.
To find her teammate in 𝐿𝐼𝐃! And now played and struck and in! People, Ryan Dominici! Further forward now to Newbury!
We're all ready to play and yeah, we'll go out and smoke it this time.
If you're a little bit confused as to how this works, don't worry. It's going to be pretty self-explanatory after the first couple of seconds. So let's get into it right now. We're going to begin with a heavy hitter. It's Ponds, Men's Premier League. The great thing about Ponds, who sit third right now on the table, is that at their best, they are the best team in Blacktown Premier League football. In fact, they might be one of the best performing teams that have ever played in Blacktown Premier League football. The issue is they are just inconsistent, and that seems to happen the second that a title race happens and you put on a Ponds jersey. No matter the playing staff, no matter the coaching staff, there are issues when it comes to the premiership race and keeping consistent throughout the entire season. Ponds are the issue that separates themselves from the premiership in most of the last couple of years, has tended to be that in the big games against their rivals, they fail to deliver. Blacktown Premier League football is dominated by a big three, and I think you'll just have to come to agree. It's Dooney, it's Ponds, it's Marong. Unfortunately, Ponds' record against those two teams is negative. And it's not just slightly negative, it's pretty poor. This is my 5th year commentating men's Premier League football here in Blacktown. I have never seen Ponds beat Marong. I have also seen Dunside beat them in 2 grand finals. Now, of course, this is not a finals prediction podcast. We'll get to that later in the year. This is a premiership run-in that goes off the back of the predictions that are made at the start of the year. And the prediction reigns true. When Ponds are on song like you saw them in the match of the round against Workers, my word, they are playing some above-the-board football, something higher than local Premier League Association football. However, they just don't find ways to win when the chips are down, it seems. There simply isn't room to lose to Dunside and Marong twice in the space of a couple of weeks. You just can't. When they play Marong next, if they lose, the title race will be over. It's as simple as that. Why is it that this Ponds team just struggled to rise to the occasion? I don't know the answer. One of the great things about Ponds this year that separates themselves from their previous versions in the last couple of years is the fact that their reserve grade team has been really stellar. They are going top of the table as of last night's result against River in reserve grade, and they provide some of the best depth in the competition. How many times in the match around this year, or if you look on Dribble, have Ponds reserve grade players come onto the pitch late on in the game and scored a goal? And the answer is pretty much every single damn week. The player to highlight, I think, as an underrated person in midfield is 𝐷𝐄𝐈𝐃-𝐒𝐿. I've watched this guy 4 times this year for 4 separate Ponds games, and he has at times run the midfield, and that's next to some of the players like Aaron Avery and Sandy Oliveira, who are of course 2 of the best players that have ever played in the Premier League. Don't forget about 𝐷𝐿𝐿. That guy can deliver a long ball and put it on a dime. He can deliver a set piece like pretty much no other player I've seen in this competition. Really tough tackler too. Look, I had Ponds down as finishing 4th this season. They of course finished inside the top 4. I have no doubts about that. I think the place that they'll finish though is 3rd. Let's not change pace completely. Let's go to another big hard hitter, but this time in the Blang & Simmons Blacktown Men's Premier League 2 and talk about Town Rangers FC. I think you guys are lucky to be top of the table, and the reasons for why it's not going as well as you'd want it to be is all down to perspective. Do you have the best team in the league, which you do? You do have the best all-star worthy team in the league, and are they just underperforming at the moment on form? Or is the competition actually better than we thought? And yes, you might have some highlight players, but some other teams are playing some very good football using players that don't have as much pedigree in Blacktown because they've come from other places around the gaff. I think two things can be true at once, but I do think you should be performing better. Whether you like it or not, being able to train and play on a synthetic pitch that never closes and is all yours to use is an advantage. There's a reason why for a year and a half you weren't defeated on that, and I was surprised in the way that you went down to Parklea in the last match of the round. But to me, you can't sign a first-grade premiership winning centre-back in 𝐼𝐃 or an 18-time goal scorer in John Malenga from your crosstown rivals and not be far ahead of the competition. You can't sign premiership winner Franklin Kobe, who came off the bench and nearly scored in the grand final against Ponds last year for Dunside, and not have him absolutely firing. For his quality on paper, this team should be undefeated. The good thing is, much like Ponds by the way, when you play at your best, no one is going to compete with you, especially at home. Nobody is as fast, nobody is as fit, nobody is as strong, and nobody talks as much smack as that team does, as you, Town Rangers. Put those strengths to better use, and I'm sure you'll come back out on top. You're still my premiership favourites, and I think you will still get promoted this year, especially since your depth is amazing, hence why your reserve grade team are top of the lot. The player I want to talk about is Sam Burke, who I think is actually the most quiet achieving forward pack player that you have. Obviously his hat-trick wasn't so quiet achieving 2 weeks ago, but the way he was making runs and sacrificing himself for the team was something that I wasn't seeing other forwards doing, and he's a reason to keep him in your starting 11 because he sacrifices himself for the good of the team. I also think 𝐼𝐃-𝐒𝐒𝐿, who was playing as a right back, he's a back 5 defender in the sense that he pushes forward and always sits in line with his right winger. And he was frustrated that he wasn't able to find channels in front of him in the match of the round. And I really do think that if you're playing a back 5, he would be the best fullback in the entire comp. Absolutely no doubt. So a special shout out to those two players. Another massive hard hitter, but this time we're going to the Women's Premier League and we're talking about Quakers Juniors, who are looking very good once again. I think Sophia Grech, coming in at the start of the year to go alongside her sister, has been one of the top goal scorers in the league this year, has been one of the top goal scorers in the Sapphire Cup as well, the equivalent to the Men's Australia Cup. But I think we also shouldn't ignore the impact of Tara and Marion Schroeder, the two girls, the sisters of course. The reason the Quakers Juniors will lose the league title this year is because in the key match against Marion, they didn't have those two. It was a midweek catch-up, and their depth was tested, and their depth failed against Marion. Obviously, that game was a 3-2. It was a very close one, and on a different day, it could have gone Quakers Juniors' way, but it didn't. And here we are with Holroyd sitting 9 from 9 with by far the best goal difference in the comp, and they will continue to walk this league because they are the best team here this year in the WPL. I think if anything, Quakers Juniors probably need a little bit more mongrel, but that happens with the fact that their team average age is so low. It's in the low 20s. That will come in time. It does. It happens with every single team that have a player base that average age is so low. But the reality is, in the key games this year, and with a top 4 that's so solidified already, in order to compete for the league title, you need to win the games against the top 4, and you didn't, unfortunately. Going down 4-1 to Holroyd, going down 3-2 to, of course, Marion, and right there the league is lost. It just is. The good thing about the WPL is that it's defined by the final series, of course. That's who people remember come the end of the year, who gets to lift the trophy, and that's where we'll see which team peaks at the right time of the season, which team have learned their lessons throughout the year. So yes, I think the title is gone, but there's still so many good things to be proud of. You're a better team already than last year, absolutely no doubt. And let's see if you've learned the lessons of last year's finals this year. Sticking in the WPL, and let's talk about one of the teams who have had one of the greatest runs in women's BDSFA history, and that's Parklea. But the problem with Parklea is that for all their good qualities as a squad and off the pitch as well, they are in between eras right now. The first season where they lost to Holroyd in the grand final and had a really good premiership season is that the WPL has moved on since then. The WPL has moved on to former professional football players and recent NPL representatives. And unfortunately, unless Parklea head down that route, they're not going to break into the top 4 anymore. Those days are gone. Inside 4 seasons, the WPL has gone from being a place for association and local women's footballers to being a place where the top 2, 3, maybe even 4 teams can genuinely compete in NPL2. And I know that's true. Parkley's runs in the last couple of years, their win in the All-Stars at the start of the years where the team was dominated by Parkley players, has to be commended. However, you are in between eras right now. If you would like to keep your player base organic, as those Parkley girls have been there for 10 plus years now, with a coach who has been there for 5 to 10 years himself, and Tom Palacios, who's a Parkley person who's been involved in the Premier League side for nearly 20 years now himself, that's great. Do it and beat the rest of the association teams. Those teams who go with association players, you will wipe the floor with them every single time like you have this season. You've almost gotten on top of Rousel Rams as well, who are very young and team with NPL experience, and you're this close to toppling them and finishing 5th and finishing best of the rest outside of the top 4 teams who are just out of this world and out of this league. Parkley need to decide if it wants to compete at the top and go and invest, or if they're going to sit where they are now. But unfortunately, you can't have both things, because these guys who are in the top 4 are a long, long way away. I hope you can find a way to balance it, but some big decisions need to be made. Grace Tangita, by the way, has scored a all-star goal. She has scored 4 goals in a game. She is someone who could stick around no matter where the rebuild takes you guys, if you decide to do it, of course. She is good, but only been available for 8 out of your 11 games. If she was available for 3 more games and to make it 11 from 11, would you guys be a bit higher? Probably. Last year's PL2 Grand Final winners, Glenwood, and gosh, this is a tough one. 1 point from your opening games, 1 point at the halfway mark of the season. I asked you in the predictions podcast this year, I said, would you be able to replace Marca Bravo Ortiz, Alvaro Ojuela, Sebastian Sabogal, Ash Alumi, Daniel Jimenez, especially since Marco Bravo Ortiz and Ash Alumi had combined for 12 match-winning goals, which in a campaign that has around 20 games is very important. Would you be able to replace them? The answer has been a resounding no. Now, obviously, there are a lot of Glenwood juniors who are still part of this squad. So again, kind of off the back of talking about Parkley Women's Premier League, I get why you're sticking to what you're doing and sticking to your guns. But you were happy to bring in Ash's older brother, Hosh Alumi, who's been the highlight player, who presses well, scores a lot of goals, and has been a really brilliant link-up striker, as well as a good runner in behind. But you weren't able to replace the rest of them. And I want to know why that's happened. I feel like off the back of PL2 Grand Final success, that would have been a really good springboard to say and advertise for some top players. I feel like this would have been a really good opportunity for you to say to some NPL players, look what we've achieved. Come and help us do it again. And it hasn't happened. The good thing about Glenwood is that you guys actually play fantastic football. The foundations are all there. And I think everyone could lay claim to the fact that they've had tough games against Glenwood, but when you guys do concede the first or second goal, you just tend to crumble a little bit, and that's just because it's becoming a trend at the halfway mark of the season. And so once a goal goes in, like I said about Prospect last year, the belief saps out of the room like a hot air balloon being popped. You guys were late bloomers last year, though. Can you guys push into a late bloomer tagline, perhaps? I think so. A draw against Prospect is definitely an admirable result, but we do need to see more of it. So, can you guys compete? Again, the finals is probably out of the question. I would say it is out of the question this year, and I think it has to be a bit of a reflection year as to how we coped and recovered from winning a grand final. But we'll see what you guys are capable of next year. But right now, it's a bit of a let's go back to the drawing board kind of season. Blacktown Premier League Spurs are good. They're just not fit, and they're just not match ready. And as a result, their season has started 8 games into the year. I know that they said this on the podcast themselves, and this might look like a cheap cop-out, but the reality is that it's very obvious that they weren't fit. In the match of the round that they played really good for 60 minutes, and then they died. That's probably the issue of Spurs coming back to Premier League football and not having coped properly with the adjustment of needing A21s, a reserve, and a first-grade team. It's like 60, 70 odd players you need to assemble, and that's tough. And it's tough on a small club and a small committee, and I totally get that. I'm empathetic towards that too. But if you're going to compete in Premier League, be ready. And they weren't. And they're going to feel the bite of that. Will they finish like a house on fire? Maybe more like a studio apartment on fire, I think, because they're going to get fitter, but the reality is their players aren't as good as Town Rangers, so they might beat some teams and do some upsets as the season goes on, because they do have some quality here and there. For example, Luke Reed is brilliant. Alex Setinich has developed into a really, really top table, potentially even low PL1 level 6. I really like him as well, but that might just be too little too late for a finals push. So, a year of learning, start earlier next time. Quakers Hill Tigers Men's Premier League. This is tough. 1 point in first grade from the opening games of the season. 1 win in reserve grade as well. Bottom of the club championship. I think the question needs to be asked, how and why has this happened? And whatever the answer is the club okay with that being the answer? I think without being too sort of wishy-washy about it, the reality is that they're staring down the face of being a part of the first ever relegation playoff. If you don't know anything about that, last place in PL1 will play second place in the Premiership of PL2. So right now, that would be Newbury Jets facing Tigers for a one-off match to decide who will be in the Premier League 1 next year, Tigers or Jets. Which, by the way, that is exciting. My opinion is that I think the Tigers have moved away a little bit from the identity that made them the team that people were fearing. When Quakers Tigers were promoted, even before they were promoted in the season, they came close. I don't think it's fair to say that Brandon Kemp's absence is the only reason that they're in this predicament at the moment, because I think I didn't really make enough of a deal about Mitch McLennan and Blake Cossa, who left the team as well. You lost two of your three starting midfielders. Who kept you in the division last year. And that's really tough. That identity, that high-pressing football, that Tigers way became synonymous with their whole promotion push. Everyone knew that Tigers were the fittest, biggest, baddest team in PL2, and they could also pass you off the ground. They could run in behind, and they could pass you off the ground and send you back to the sheds in 360. Tigers were always known for their wingers being so quick and decisive and able to put good balls into the box. Now they play a 5-4-1 sort of anchor system, if you like, and it's a little bit pessimistic, to be honest. It's not progressive, it's not front-footed, it's sit in and hope. For a team that have been known for having a real youthful energy around them and a just positive approach to all things football in years gone by. And I think a little bit of that has subsided and pushed away. Even if the whole point of the season is to blood 21s into the first grade, why not play them in a way that you want them to play in 5 years? Personally, I don't see the point in playing them in a highly defensive formation where the goal is to sit in and hope that a team doesn't score against you and then to nick one on the counter. If the point is making these 21s players good enough to play first grade in Premier League 1, then play them in a way that you want them to play in Premier League 1 in 5 years. Whether your 21s who have come through the club and come through the system and been blooded into first grade have the ceiling to eventually win a premiership is completely irrelevant, because we need to talk about what's happening right now. And I think if the point is to keep these 21s and make them an authentic, organic squad, because right now you're sitting with 1 point from the first 9 games of the season, and if that's not working, what's to say that that's going to change? Why not just try and play front-footed football like the way that you built your identity since you returned to the Premier League, and just go for it and try and play in a way that's proactive? And if it's too front-footed and you concede too many goals, so be it. You're in a relegation playoff. You're better than any of the PL2 teams, and you could realistically win that game. And I think for that reason alone, by the fact that it is a relegation playoff, I would personally switch into that front-footed approach, because the buffer is there and you're lucky that there is a playoff, because I think you could realistically beat any PL2 team. Now look, I'm not a coach. I'm certainly not Taron Rockall, but it's just the way that I see it, and I would love to see Tigers, the ones who I know, play the Tigers' way. Standout player, by the way, is Nicholas Magias. He's someone that I've watched play 2 21s grand finals now, and now a match of the round in first grade. I've also watched him come off the bench when he was a PL2 young'un, and he's now really established himself as a first grade regular. He's good enough to play for a lot of teams that are around Quakers Hill Tigers on the table, and he is a stellar example of a 21s to first grade project gone right. I think the reserve grade factor is one that's an underrated aspect of Riverstone, but the reality is that they're missing a proper spine in this team. Now, they've had some massive injuries hit them this year. According to them, they've lost a centre-back, they've lost a 10, they've lost a striker, and so they're playing makeshift players everywhere. But the reality is there's some really good players there, whether they're playing out of position or not. I think they could be higher up the table, because other teams are competing with injuries as well. I think the match of the round against Palonia was a stellar example that they're completely lacking a 6. Whether it's Gurgis Abdallah or it's Daniel Salinas, who's meant to be playing in that position, they're not natural to it, and you want them further forward creating. I think as well, not having your starting goalkeeper in Chris Janic in the team has been a massive drawback, and I don't really know where he is. Where's he gone? We miss you. Again, back to the spine. You're missing a goalkeeper, you're missing a 6, and you've already talked about on the podcast missing a striker. So the central figures that hold down the middle block of your team are weak. And that's why I think your team has struggled this year. You have so much creativity out wide. You move the ball beautifully well. And the fact that this is your coach's first year and he's got the reserve grade pumping as well, as of course we should shout out Matt, who's the coach there too. Great. This is the start of a great project. But you need those core centre lining players. Speaking of spine-based players, though, I think Solomon Lardo has been really impressive. I only watched him for about 25 minutes and I thought he was fantastic in the match of the round. Get him more involved. And I actually think that they'll finish below Palonia on the table this year because Palonia have a more balanced midfield. And it's down to the work of one man, Michael Cullen. Across one match of the round, a game against Ponds and also a game against Workers, I've now realised what Michael Cullen's impact is for Palonia off of the ball. And it is up there with some of the best work rate and intelligent pressing in the entire division. I watched Michael Cullen single-handedly press Brendan Bazina and Danny McDougall into unfamiliar territory, and they couldn't operate in the 1-1 draw between Workers and Palonia. Michael Cullen was not able to do anything on the ball because of the fact that Palonia were being dominated by Workers, but what he did was he individually shut down, and for 90 minutes as well, shut down their two most positive, creative and effective deep-lying playmakers and engine room runners. It was actually phenomenal to watch. Phenomenal to watch. So, come the Riverstone match of the round, when there was no natural six, as I've just talked about in the previous segment, that's why he flourished. He was like, I have all this space to operate. Let me just burn through one layer of defence, and let me just put one in behind for Mohamed Nazari, who's another really great up-and-comer, by the way. If we stop the glaze for a second, we'll talk about Palonia a bit more in depth. Palonia's best positive is that they know that they are limited in areas and they know where they are strong. Niggly, physical, very, very fit, and the older player base that they have, the sort of age range of 27 and above, like your Cullens, for example, and your Lockie Nixon, this and that. And then they have young'uns who are willing to run their backside off for the team. The way that Palonia have pushed some 21s into first grade space like Ace Palugadu and Mohamed Nazari, as well as the likes who are coming off the bench of Sami Abbas, for example. These are good kids, very, very good kids, very, very fit, and they know the way to play. So you've got a core of very physical guys who know how to control the game, and you've got a young player base who are learning in the midst and the presence of these older guys, and it's combining well. That's why he picked up a couple of points in the last couple of weeks. Your issue is that you're a momentum and a purple patch team. I think you could either ride this wave and turn it into a tsunami and actually push for the top four like you sort of hinted to on the podcast. Well, not hinted to, you were pretty explicit about it. I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's going to happen. I think you'll end up finishing probably above Riverstone, and I think you'll finish pretty well clear of the bottom places. But you could also not ride this wave of momentum and you might finish down towards the bottom. You're very much a momentum team and you sort of build on things, or you either pull the brick out from the bottom of the wall and you crumble. That's always been the Palonia thing, even down to the PL2 days. We know that. Ponds WPL team took a team of Winston Hills girls who were finishing towards the bottom of the table in the first 2 years, added some talent from other Blacktown teams, and find themselves with 0 points from the opening 10 games of their season. Shannon Murray is a fantastic player, and despite the fact that they are on 0 points right now from the opening 10 games, she's had a stellar season, maybe the best of her Blacktown Premier League career. It's safe to say. I think Rebecca Cooper will also develop into a really, really sharp number 9, or even wide forward, or winger if you like, when she just sort of fixes up her decision making in front of goal. I think Pond's biggest issue is that you listen to them on the bench and you listen to them on the field, and it's like there's banter going on all the time. But like, banter is all well and good, and it's a great group of girls. Like, I have nothing against the group of girls at all. But like, your lost column reads 10, so just like lock in a little bit. It's almost frustrating to see game day treated so unseriously. And if it's happening on game day, it's happening in training, and that's why they're not developing, per se. There needs to be some thought process to how it's going to look going forward, because I'm not sure that this core is the greatest way to do it, and if it is going to be this core, then you need to stick with some development and actually start taking it a bit more seriously. Quakers Hill Tigers girls, on the other hand, this is an example of an investment in a project coming to fruition in a very, very positive way. It's an example of stellar coaching. It's turned a team from strugglers to real combatants. They know how to push at least a zero out of defence into a midfield general has been fantastic to watch. That's why she has 2 match of the round goals now to her name and has picked up 4 of your 7 points this season. There's a reason why 𝐑𝐄𝐕𝐈𝐄𝐿𝐿 is a baller in any position that she plays, wide or central, left or right, because she's talented and she's been allowed to unlock those talents. There's a reason why Bianca O'Brien has taken her game to another level this year, because she's quite good and she'll be able to unlock that with a team understanding how she plays. This is an example of good coaching and good preparation. Now, let's not get it twisted. You guys are still a year, maybe even 2 years away from being able to compete properly in finals, and you will need some signings. Again, it's like Park Lee. It's great that you have all these organic players and these players that are invested to doing this for a long, long time, and it's great that these 21s and 18s even are coming through, but to compete at the top parts, you're going to need some help from elsewhere. It's your choice as to when you want to do that. Maybe it's next year. Maybe it's the year after. Maybe it's the year after that. The reality is, if you're relying on 18s and 21s and some young players in their early 20s, then that's fine. You're going to have plenty of years to get this right. At what point do you dip into the, let's go to the NPL? Forgive the sudden colour scheme change, but I had to film this over 2 days. Let's continue on with the Workers boys. For the Workers boys, it's simple because we've said it and everybody knows it already. The reality is they're good, but are they good? You kind of have the Ponds issue in that when you come up against top teams in the league, you don't have a great record against them, and the reason why you keep finishing below Ponds is because when you include Ponds in that equation, you lose against them pretty frequently. Workers, as we know, play some of the most aesthetic football, but I think what it comes down to is if you take a top three side, one of the big three sides, and you take Workers' side and you compare goalkeeper, defence, midfield and attack, Workers to any of the other top three sides, are they better in every single, or at least most of, more than 50% of the positions? And the answer is no, but you take that Workers' side and you do the same thing with any team below them, they are better for at least more than 50% of the positions on a pitch. The reality for Workers might be that they are just, player for player, the fourth best team in the comp. And there's nothing wrong with that. That means they compete exactly right where they want to be. The fact that you took points off a Dunside team, who maybe have better players than you, is a really, really good result. As well, I think Workers might be hindered by the fact that in 2 matches of the round game that they played, which was unfortunate that they were back-to-back and against two really, really good sides, they completely capitulated. They had one of the worst two showings probably of their last 10 years as a Premier League club. But outside of that, they've been undefeated against every single other team this year. And that includes that game against Dunside. These are some good results. So Workers are in fourth. I think they'll stay there. I did predict them to be third at the start of the year, but Ponds are better. I think the player I want to highlight is Ahmed Badat. I mean, he's come in and scored and he's in Golden Boot contention. People were saying, would he be able to make the step up? Is his game consistent enough? And the answer to all these questions has proven to be yes. Day 3 of recording. This is my house. Ropes Crossing Strikers joined the Women's Premier League this year and they've done very good. Very good when you're comparing them to what they're coming up against, considering it's their first year as a Women's Premier League squad as well. They are competing in around similar points to the likes of Parklea, but this is their first year as a squad together. And that's what makes it, and that's what's giving me, I would say, the slightly more positive tone towards them, because I think the fact that they've done it with only just being a new squad is an admirable thing and a really impressive thing. As we've already explored on the podcast this year already, your team and your squad is kind of broken up into a different couple of facets. You've got your experienced players like Sam at the back. Then you've also got this sort of young to mid-20s that are doing a lot of the running. And then you've got some young kids coming through who could potentially lead this project forward for the next X amount of years. Obviously, you're being beaten by some significant scorelines by some of the better teams. And as we've already established this year, it's impossible to compete with the top four unless you dip your toe into the NPL world. But the system is clear to see. I think it's hard to give you a mid-season review because you're kind of like on the sand in the sense that you're not trying to avoid a position at the bottom of the table, but I think it's impossible to reach top four. So what you're doing is just good. It's quite on the sand, if you like. It's up to you now, like I said with Parklea, whether you want to go and ask for those better, those more experienced representative players, or if you'd like to keep growing organically. It's your choice. For the first time I've ever seen with Oakville, I don't think you guys were prepared to take on this season from round one. I think it took you a couple of rounds to at least get up to full match speed. And I wonder if that has to do with the outgoing era that was sort of led by the 𝐑𝐄𝐕𝐈𝐃-𝐒𝐿𝐼 and has now transitioned into the 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐿 era. While I never mentioned this when it came to the Palonia take, I'm actually not a massive fan of the player-coach system. I'm a huge fan of Nathan 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐿 as a player. Not sure about him yet as a coach because we haven't seen enough yet. We're only halfway through his first ever season in the technical area, which is technically on the pitch. But I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it works a lot of the time. I would love to see 𝐒𝐿𝐼 supported by a really good coaching staff around him because I think it's really hard for a player who's not obviously the coach to differentiate between, is this my mate Nathan 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐿 talking to me? Is this my coach Nathan 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐿 talking to me? Or is this my centre midfielder or defensive midfielder or centre back Nathan 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐿 talking to me? When he yells at you, who's yelling at you? The coach, the mate, or the player? That's a hard differential to figure out and balance. Oakville has some good players here and there. I'm a big fan of Nathan White. I think Logan Wilkins is the pick of the bunch. They've been back to his best. And that's why when I said that Malenja, as in John, wouldn't be as big a loss as some people think, I think it's because I knew Logan was coming back and we know what he's about. He scored like 30 or 40 goals for himself and he's very consistently getting high goal numbers. So they've replaced their main goal scorer with a guy who's already had that mantle placed upon him and done it across multiple seasons, more seasons. So I'm not surprised that they're okay without him. And by okay, it means that they're in a top four race. I'll state this right now, I don't think Oakville in the current way that they're playing with their current levels of consistency are actually good enough to compete at the top. And I think Town Rangers, for example, who are at the top, are a lot fitter and technically better than them. Interestingly though, they beat Newbury in a game where it would have been long ball versus long ball. The fact that Oakville's long ball football, which have been playing for a lot more time than the Newburys, was able to come out on top against a team who are technically above them on the table is a really interesting point. We know, and we said this last year as well, that if Oakville lock in and they get to the final series, they can beat anybody because of the way that they play and the way that they bring their crowd into the game. It's a factor that is underrated in conversations like these. Oakville will probably sneak into the top 4 based upon their pedigree and history, but I think I've seen better Oakville teams in the past.
Our season so far has been one of ups and downs. I think we've got the least amount of games played, but the last few wins I think have set us on the right track. If we continue with these results and continue winning, I think we'll move up the ladder and get towards those top 4 finals places. The standout performer from our team over the last few games has definitely been Yasu, who has pulled out some screamers. Special shout out to Jake as well with his top bins free kick.
Sticking still with PL2, and it's time to talk about St. Pat's. And they brought in some players at the start of the year. They lost some players, particularly a star player who went up to PL1 with Tigers. And what have they done? Well, it's rather interesting. They have a really, really good defensive record. Their goal difference is 0. They've only scored 8, but they've only conceded 8. So it's been really admirable to see what this new style has brought about. But unfortunately, for all their defensive solidarity, they are where they are on the table for a reason. St. Pat's have a good culture. There are some great human beings there. They have a really nice pitch and a really good club committee. And I would like them to let us know what their strategy is going forward and what they plan to do as a Premier League entity. Because the reality is, while everybody else has got better around them, I think it was safe to say last year that they stagnated, and I think this year it's safe to say that they're starting to fall a little bit behind the 8 ball. You've also got a really core, solid group of players, particularly through your spine, the spine of your team. You've got some good centre-backs, you've got a good goalkeeper, you've got some good centre midfielders, and you had a good striker last year. You have a good striker in Sylvester Roberts this year too. You don't want to risk losing them as well, because you can really build a premiership base around those guys, but there's other areas where there's been some lacking. I think if there's another season where finals are missed, it will finally encourage St. Pat's to come together and say, let's get back to a drawing board a little bit. Because when I see you guys play, I'm so impressed at times. I'm really, really so impressed by how you push the ball through the midfield. You allow your players to use their creative flair and their technical ability to create chances and open up holes in the opposition's defence. The ship quite often keels over. So we need to stop that from happening. And how's that going to happen? I don't know. St. Pat's unlikely that you'll finish in the top 4 this year. I think you will miss out. But I do like the way that they play. I just want to see them put it into results. Newbury Jets, on the other hand, well, you've completely gone against the grain. And did people expect you to be exactly where you are right now? I don't think so. And neither did I. When I put you guys as a relegation threatened team, was I rage baiting you? No. I genuinely thought you would struggle. But I still hold the principles of what I said in my predictions podcast to this day. The best part about your team, as you can see from my graphic to the right of my head, is that you have the best player in the comp. But if it comes to the second half of the season and teams have finally figured out, hey, we need to put 2, sometimes 3 players on this guy, or if he picks up an injury, you will be in trouble. And I think that's safe to say as well. It's to the point now where Blake Curry is so good that I want to actually start a GoFundMe to pay for his PL1 registration. And I think as well, if I was to do a comparison between the teams around you who are vying for the promotion spots, if Prospect lost James Cossier, or if Abuka dropped out of Town Rangers, if Manandeep got injured and couldn't play for Newbury, would the impact be as great upon them they're losing their star player as it would be for Minjibury losing Blake Curry, their star player? And I think you guys would probably be hindered the most because your defence has struggled the most in comparison to those 6, arguably 7 teams that are competing for top 4, if not promotion. That defence needs to solidify quickly because Blake can't just be relied upon to drag you through the forage. I don't think you'll get promoted because Town Rangers' squad is too good, and I've already said that at the start of the video, but in first grade, certainly, you could have a really good final series if you peak at the right time and all your boys stay fit, particularly BC. But just to wrap it up, 19 goals against in 8 games. Fix it up, lads.
So, Pat Lee, the boys of Pat Lee are on their mid-season break here in Dubai. They've had a reasonable start to the season. A few good wins and then a couple of losses, but they're coming back. They're saying rejuvenated after the win last week. Looking at players like Brian Osford, Nathan Smith, Garen been doing fantastically well. Hunter French has stepped up, Acid and that Smith as well. But overall, the reserves and the first team boys are doing incredibly well. What's planned for the second half of the season? Well, we've got Glenwood in a couple of weeks. That's going to be a big one. And hopefully we can continue to move on from there. But, good and bad, you know, consistency is the main thing, but hopefully this little trip to Dubai that the boys have got will set them up in the season moving forward.
Still sticking in PL2, now it's time to talk about Parklea, and I need to make sure that I don't get too carried away by how good their match of the round performance was, so let me try and not do that. I think you could get promoted. Funnily enough, Parklea has one of the best defences in the comp, and not only that, they have the best striker in the comp. Ryan Hoffsmith, and if you haven't heard me say it already, would start for, I suggest, 7 of the 9 Premier League 1 clubs. Run through those teams in your head for a second and think about who lacks a good, consistent number 9. Ryan Hoffsmith. Now think about a number 9 who not only just scores lots of goals, presses, wins aerial duels, makes runs in behind, and holds up the ball. Ryan Hoffsmith. The only deterrent would be the injury concerns. But this isn't the Ryan Hoffsmith podcast, although perhaps it should be. The way I saw you play, and the critique that I had at the halfway point of the last season as well, was that when you play at your best, you've now proven it on a match of the round, you are borderline unstoppable. That third goal you scored last week was the best goal I have seen in terms of the team goal category. That was fantastic. Can you keep it consistent? History tells us, or at least history being last year, tells us no. And you need to avoid what happened last year. And if you do, you'll certainly not only finish in the top 4, but I think you could actually do something pretty special on the club championship. My prediction is that Parklea will finish 2nd place, meaning that they'll go into the promotion playoff against whoever finishes last in 1st, as in 1st division. I do wonder if at times, though, your coach, his brain is so big that does it get to the point where being at a local level where you can only train once or twice a week, can there sometimes be too much information that's given? Potentially. How is James Boyle going to adjust, or how is he going to continue to adjust to playing local football, local association Premier League football, compared to playing at the NPL world where you're drilled to know the insides and outs of football from the day you're born? A hard strike to balance when your brain is like this and your experience is up here, when you've got players who are paying to pay registration.
Hey Mark, just a little bit of an update regarding Newbury Bulls season so far. We're pretty happy with the way things have panned out. We're competing along 1st grade and competing with a reserve grade as well. So it's been pretty tight in 1st grade. I think there's probably about 6 teams that can probably vie for top spot. So it's really pleasing to see the quality of football has been really good. It always goes down to the wire. So well done to everyone. We're liking the competition. It's definitely improved. The competition's definitely improved from last year, so that's really pleasing to see. So a really good start to the season for us, and we're really happy. So good luck to everyone. Have a great time.
Still in PL2, and Newbury have the best spine in the entire PL2 competition. You have from front to back players that have world-class abilities in their locker room. 𝐑𝐄𝐕𝐈𝐄𝐼 is the best goalkeeper in the comp. Alejandro Arguin is my favourite bulldog-like midfielder in the comp with heaps of energy, even though he's nearing his 40s. And Marong Men might be the best striker of football in the entire Blacktown Association. Either go back and watch the last match of the round that he featured in, or wait till the next one, and hopefully he features in it. And then watch him strike a football. Newbury's biggest issue this year, and what might stop them from getting into the top 2, 3, 4 spots, is the fact that their lineups are inconsistent, and that's forcing their form to be inconsistent. Now, I'm not sure if it's due to injury or due to what they said at the start of the year in their first podcast, that they were just trying to tie a whole lot of different social groups together, but they're not getting the same starting 11. Like 𝐑𝐄𝐕𝐈𝐄𝐼, as good as he's a goalkeeper, he didn't play last week. Why is that? Marong Men hasn't played in previous weeks gone by. Why is that? Pretty sure Alejandro Arguin, who is my player to watch, didn't play last week, and they lost to Oakville. So my question is, why are there so many inconsistencies in terms of who line up that you're struggling with? Because when you play your best 11, which has only happened once or twice this entire year, in my opinion, you've been great, you've been good, and you're getting points. If you guys can find a way to tie down your best 11, you'll do something special. But what I've seen so far is that's not happening because you can't consistently get your players to come to the game. I don't know what's going on. As you saw as well from the way that Raj Mehta got onto the chair that he was sitting in before he filmed that video, that guy is trying to break down football matches in a way that goes above and beyond what other people are doing, and I respect the effort level extremely, extremely high. However, I don't see that when I watch Newbury play. They play a bullish style of football, a very effective style of football at this level. Oakville outbullied you the other week, and that could have put you in first place if you'd have taken your chances. So, figure out your style of play, get your players to the game, and you could very easily launch a promotion push. But I think Parkley's consistency in terms of lineups and the way that they can play at their absolute best in terms of aesthetics and effectiveness could probably pip you to the post, but you will finish top 4. I've already predicted Holroyd to take out the title in the WPL, and now it's about who comes and finishes where and who we might get in the finals matchups. And the reality from Marong is that they were 30 seconds from taking points and being the only team to take points off of Holroyd in the first round of the season, but unfortunately, an absolutely sensational free kick took that privilege off them. Marong have unearthed many local gems this year, but I think the one that we should talk about is Scarlett Byrne. We mentioned her on a podcast a couple of weeks ago when Marong were on, but her impact in shutting down Izzy Grech was absolutely phenomenal in that Quakers Juniors match of the round game that I commentated. Like any other team, though, towards the top of the tree in WPL, you've gone to other clubs, you've gone to NPL, and you've said, please come and play for us, and the players that have are obviously playing at a level that's higher than what the association girls can give. Whether or not the comp is becoming a NPL2 light version is up for another debate, but that is what's working, and it's getting you towards the top of the tree, and the way that you're playing is pretty respectable. Obviously, you're going to finish the top 4. Nobody else is going to come near the top 4 that's already established itself this season. It's about where you'll finish, and I think you'll finish second place. You've only got the one loss. You've already beat Quakers Juniors once, and you've kept Kellyville scoreless as well, who are really starting to find their form around the time that you played them too. Scarlett Byrne, though, by the way, demon of a footballer. Prospect are another PL2 team on 13 points, and it really is tough to call at this point because who is going to finish in this top 4? And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about whichever team picks up the most points. Surprise, shock horror. Whatever the table says at the end of the year, the difference between first place and maybe 7th place is about this much. The way I just said with Newbury as well, it'll be about who can get their players to be at their best on the day, who will have injuries at the time, who will be available to play the midweek catch-up games, who will be available this weekend when we have long weekend catch-up games, for example. It's going to come down to finite, minute, sort of under-the-surface level details will determine the difference between who makes top 4 and who doesn't. I'm a massive fan of 𝐑𝐄𝐈𝐃 for Prospect. He's obviously your best player, and I'm really happy that you brought back some of the old guard who helped you get out of PL2 and into PL1 in the first place. It's great to see Danny Boozers back between the sticks, for example. You have a really solid midfield pair screening in front of your centre-backs as well. It's been a real joy to watch. And by all eyewitness accounts, you're playing far better than what you were when you played and lost in the match of the round that I called. It's weird. My head kind of says I think Prospect will slip out of the top 4. But at the same time, while you're on 13 points right now, you dropped 2 to Glenwood. You're the first team to give away points to Glenwood all year. And you could have been knocking on first place had you have done what everybody else has done against Glenwood this year. And that's the crazy thing about PL2. Those finite details, why didn't you win that day? Those are the fine margins. Don't make that mistake again if you want to go up. Quakers Juniors are a genuine threat of making the PL1 top 4 after getting 2 wins from their last 3 rounds, and that third round, of course, being a bye. They've now positioned themselves really, really well to make a second half of the season push for that top 4. It is to the surprise of no one, and of course, Moi predicted it perfectly, that by the time that their players who dropped out last year, like your Soul Surgeons, like your Gatsby Greys, like your Connor Mays in defence, by the time that these guys got back to full match sharpness, what a surprise, they start stringing some wins and some points together. And I said it at the start of the year, these guys who went and played all age, or for Soul, for example, who didn't play at all, when you drop out and you come back, it takes some time to adjust, especially since the Premier League is extremely fit, extremely fast, and extremely physical. You saw what an unfit Quakers Hill side can do against the reigning champions Dunside in round 1, by the way, and they were not fit, and they probably didn't deserve to win that day. That team is now at least 70% better than what you saw in round 1 now. When Palonia came on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and they were like, oh, we switched off and let Quakers Juniors score 3 goals against us in the span of 20 minutes. What if you flip the script on its head there and you say, actually, Quakers Juniors made a couple of adjustments, a couple of subs, and in 20 minutes they scored 3 goals because they switched, they clicked into gear. Perspective changes everything. Did Palonia switch off? Or are Quakers Juniors kind of good? It's very much still Workers' 4th and final spot to lose. I think Quakers Juniors aren't in the driver's seat for that spot, but they could certainly threaten, and the games against those top teams will determine who gets that spot. By the way, Daniel Soldan, baller. Eastern Creek, having only played 6 games so far this season, 6 games, could crush them. Not only that, they've also suffered 5 season-ending injuries, 1 to a first-grade player, but a couple to some borderline resis and first-grade players who provide a lot of depth and competition off the bench. Gone. Done for the season, including one of the captain and leadership figures in Joe Dunn. But the craziest thing about Eastern Creek is that they've only played 1 game at home all season. 1 from 6. 1 from 6. The issue then for Eastern Creek will be the fact that when they play these catch-up games, they're going to have to be midweek. And in years gone by, that's not actually served Eastern Creek all that well. Mainly because a lot of their guys actually work on the tools. And to ask them to play in the midweek as a catch-up, that's tough. I still also think that they're going to be missing out on Danny Hinton being their coach this year. It is impossible to ignore him leaving, but from all accounts that I'm hearing and from themselves as well, Matt Hetrick and Scott Young are having a really good time of it. And also we should talk about 𝐑𝐄𝐕𝐈𝐃-𝐒𝐄𝐲, who's played 5 of the 6 games and scored 4 goals already. The advantage for Creek is that they could either build up some really, really good momentum as they have a string of home games. They don't have to do a lot of travel. They can sit by their home base. They can play the way that they want to play on that massive Morrow reserve, or the load will crush them. I don't think there's much of an in-between. Let's talk about Dunside Hawks. One of the few teams in all of our comps who started this season slowly, but are starting to now figure themselves out in terms of how they tactically set up this year and how they look going forward. Dunside's issue has never been, and to this day still isn't, defence. They have the best defence in all of our competitions. 5 goals conceded this whole year. But unfortunately, when you're competing with a team who are 7 from 7 to start the season, when you slip up in round 1, almost instantly you allowed Marong to gain momentum. Now, the win over Ponds should provide the momentum for you to keep going, and today, as in today, you're playing Marong themselves. Can you guys learn from when you played them a couple of weeks later in the grand final qualifier and use that feeling to verse them and beat them again and make it a title race? The questions I had for you at the start of the season were around how would you integrate this brand new player into your team, but one thing that's happened is that you haven't had Kyle Dominici all year. Arguably the league's best midfielder, just missing. And you've been able to replace him, but it did take a couple of rounds for you to figure it out. That's okay because you've done it pretty quickly. But in the time it's taken to learn how to play with this new team and the slightly changed personnel, Marong have gone away. Something I did get wrong on the predictions podcast is what you've done with your reserve grade team. You guys are fantastic there, and your 21s are very good too. You guys are in the running for a serious club championship push. But in first grade specifically, there is no wiggle room, and all you can do is beat Marong this afternoon and then hope that you're perfect for the rest of the year, because that's what it takes. Like I said with Ponds, I think at your best, due to the slightly younger core of your team, your ability to play teams off the park is maybe the best in the entire league. And when it comes to finals time, at least in my time in the BDSFA, there is no team better than you guys. But I think for the rest of the season, we will see that the league title has probably evaded you guys once again. Second place, you'll finish. Nothing to be upset about. What can you do in the final series? And finally, Marong Men's. It's funny because some people are going to listen to this and roll their eyes, and I urge you to just listen to the whole thing, and I'll try my best to explain it. Marong's ability to find a way to win is second to none, and it's what separates them from other teams. And it's what is part of what separates them from other teams. But I think there is one key factor that we need to talk about now, finally. Marong's coaching staff and the belief that the squad has in their coaches to make the right decisions is the difference between Marong having won 3 straight premierships in first grade and 3 straight club championships. It comes down to Kevy Guerrero, Shia Chakal, and this year, Robbie Benjamin too. Sticking mainly with those first 2 who have built this dynasty, and that is exactly what it is. When Marong beat Quakers Juniors in a match of around 4-1 the other day, the first thing that Kevy said coming into the sheds was congratulations, but with that goal that we conceded, if you don't come to training on Wednesday, you'll be dropped. Now you might sit here and say the Dunside have won 2 championships in the time that Marong have won just 1. And I would say, yes, you are exactly right. But this is not about a finals push. This is about consistency over the course of around 18 to 20 games in a season. In 2 match of the round games, they have not had their 2-time reigning player of the year. They've traded him out with an 18-year-old, and that kid has stepped up and provided a goal and an assist across both of those 2 games. I think as well as someone like Dylan Owusu, who had half a leg coming into last year and maybe 3/4 of a leg coming into this one. He was switched to a centre-back because they lost Arrow Gar to Town Rangers and PL2. And he's just gone, okay, I'll make it work. And they just make things work. It doesn't make sense that it works, but somehow it does. It doesn't make sense that Marong lose their top goal scorer from last year in Majid Eslami to an ACL tear, and they're just somehow able to sit 7 from 7 at the start of the season. Now, this is going to come out after they play Dunside in what could prove to be a game that brings the title race back into contention, and you know what? I hope we have something that gives us a bit more drama, because it's becoming frustrating seeing Marong just run away with it all the time. But the reason they're doing it is because I really, really do think that what separates them from the other teams that are around them that might have a better player base and a team that maybe can play better on their absolute best day is that Marong don't need to be on their best day to find maximum points from a game. It's not quite tactical, although that does come into it, and it's not quite a physical thing, although again, that does come into it. It's a belief. It's an intangible thing about the way that they play. As I've already mentioned a million times, when Dunside or Ponds play their best football is probably better than Marong's. And yet somehow they still find a way to put themselves up for a 4th straight premiership. The trust that the players across both first and reserve grade have in their coach is one that motivates them to play for the 18 to 20 rounds per season. That's not to say that any other coach is less capable or less able to do something magical than what these guys are able to do. But the proof is in the league title pudding. Can you actually sit here and look at me in the eyes and say, my team buys into my coach's philosophy more than Marong? And that intangible, feeling, instinctive, gut link with the coaching staff is what makes the difference, in my opinion. That is the Marong way. Where will they finish? First place. I'm recording this on a Friday night. This will look really stupid if they lose to Dunside tomorrow. But hey, that's what this kind of podcast is all about. And I really hope you've enjoyed it, because that's going to do it for another episode of the Blacktown Premier League podcast. I am ready to go inside and stop recording. This has taken a long time to put together. If you appreciate the level of effort that has gone into a video like this, please remember to hit the like button. We absolutely crushed the views for this last year. I want to see those likes match it. Can we hit, please, 50 likes? All right, I'm done talking. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Send me a text, put it on the Facebook. I want to know what your opinion is about my opinion. Thanks for getting to this point of the episode. Give love to your mothers and fathers. Have a good game this weekend. And see you later. Cue the outro music. But it's fallen here towards 𝐼𝐃!
Oh my word.
And now played and struck and in! Further forward now to Newbury! Ryan Dominici! Wants a second goal. Isabel Greb should have a second goal! And finishes with ease!